Hey, everybody, welcome to the Scott Mann Podcast, episode 2. And our guest today is Doron Keidar. And Doron, he and I connected on a phone call as I was doing research for the Gathering Storm project that we're working as a Task Force Pineapple product to basically help get in front of, overcome, and at least mitigate what we believe is the gathering storm of a Al-Qaeda-sponsored terror attack here in the homeland. That's going to look a lot more like the October 7 attacks in Israel than the World Trade Center Pentagon attacks of 9/11. In other words, locally distributed, complex, horrific attacks by teams of 8 to 10 highly trained terrorists who are prepared to fight to the end, hitting us where we live and where we work and where we play. And it just so happens that this is exactly what happened on October 7 in Israel. And so many of you have been asking for information and perspective on, okay, if that's the threat, then what do we do? What do we do as individuals? What do we do as a community? How do we work with law enforcement? Law enforcement asking, what do I do if I'm not getting anything from the federal government on this? And a federal government that for at least the last 4 years has been completely asleep at the switch on this, that completely dismissive of it. And we'll see what happens with the incoming administration. But enough questions from those of you at the state, local, and community levels that we felt compelled to bring Doron into this chair and to talk with you to give you perspective on October 7 and what the lessons learned were from that and what it means to us here at home. If this correlation of localized attacks, complex attacks, is something worth taking stock of, and I believe it is, then this conversation is designed to inform that from a man who lived it through his point of view. Doron is a career member of the Israeli Defense Forces, or the IDF. He started his IDF service in 2003. He served in just about every elite unit you can imagine. He started out in the Givati Battalion. He stood up a search and rescue unit there in the Homeland Front. He finished up his initial service in the Northern Command and then did reserve duty from 2006 to 2014. In 2018, Doron was recruited to a Special Forces Mobility Unit of the 98th Paratroopers Division. And then he created a special division for the 35th Paratroopers, which was another mobility. And that's where he was when the war broke out, or when the horrific attacks by Hamas happened on October 7. He's been working in the Israeli security sector since 2007. Okay. And he's been a team leader on major security details since 2018, doing close protection of VIPs. So he knows that aspect as well. He has a passion for biblical history. He has a nonprofit called Cry for Zion, and many, many more things about him. But he's in the United States traveling around right now, talking to community leaders about what happened in Israel on October 7 and why we should be paying attention to it, and why what happened there could very easily happen here, and what we should learn. And so that is the focus of this interview, regardless of your politics, regardless of your religious affiliations, or whether you are pro-Israel or anti-Israel, or pro-Palestinian, anti-Palestinian. The point here is that what happened on October 7 is largely not understood in the United States, certainly from the perspective of a warfighter who walked the ground in the aftermath of the Nova concert slaughter and went into the neighborhoods where women and children were slain and beheaded. Because those are the realities that we're talking about in terms of the manifestation of this type of attack. And we're gonna I will say there's some graphic discussion here, but it's not certainly not something you want your kids watching, but it's not so graphic that it will keep you from moving forward, right? That's not the point. The point here is to establish the level of localized concern, that you understand where the training needs need to come from, and maybe this will answer some of your questions about what next, because he has some great perspective, and that's really what this interview is about. Is a first-person account from someone who lived October 7 and who now is traveling the United States, talking to communities and warning them about this gathering storm. So with that, let's get into the interview with Doron Keidar. Welcome to the Scott Mann Podcast, where we connect like our lives depend on it. Doron, welcome, man. Good to have you here. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks to everybody for being here on the Scott Mann Podcast. Really honored to have you here, man. You drove all night to get here. It means so much that you're here with us. I really didn't intend for you to drive all night, but it speaks volumes. We haven't known each other that long, but just the kind of dude you are to make it. And I think more than anything, just on behalf of the folks watching this, especially coming on the heels of Sarah's interview, I think it means even more that you literally drove through the night to get here. So thank you. If it's okay with you, I'm kind of gonna get right into it with the interview here. So, first thing I'm gonna do is kind of set up for folks watching this is Doron, that you're gonna see has a perspective that is unmatched in a lot of ways from a lot of the stuff that you see here in the U.S. on what happened on October 7 and the events surrounding that and what the lessons learned are from that. And again, kind of on the heels of the interview with Sarah that I did, I'd really like to almost frame this conversation, because we'll have more. And I know there's a much broader aspect to your mission and what you're doing, and as you travel the country and do that, we'll talk about that a little bit towards the end. But for the preponderance of the interview, what I'd like to do is maybe frame and isolate the time period around October 7, because I think from what you've learned from complex attacks that were perpetrated that day by Hamas and frankly other fighters as well, at least from our reporting that were part of that. I want to try to draw out as much and as many lessons learned as we can from your point of view that folks watching could actually apply in their own communities. And you and I have talked about this a lot, and I just feel like the horrific things that you all endured and what you responded to, the generosity that you're bringing over here to the United States and travel around and talk about that. I want to give as many people as possible an opportunity to hear those lessons from you. Is that okay for how we proceed today?
Totally.
Sound like awesome. A plan? Okay, so I can't imagine what you all went through on that day, but I just wonder if you could kind of take us through the events of October 7 from a local perspective, from your own experience, and then we'll build on it from there.
Well, first of all, keep in mind that leading up to October 7th, at least my unit and the division we were operating under, which is essentially the equivalent to your MARSOC, right? If I'm saying
Marine Special Operations Command,
or SOCOM. Sorry, SOCOM.
SOCOM, yeah.
Excuse
Special
me.
Operations
Yes.
Command. That's okay. Yeah.
And so it's basically the tip of the spear of our Special Forces community. And we're basically the ones that are supposed to be the first ones to stop any threat anywhere it may be, because most of the military basically has areas of responsibility. So if it's the Southern Command units, then they're the Gaza communities area, and that's actually where I started my military career.
Right.
And so I was in Gaza in 2004 before the pullout, and I saw the terrorists and Hamas and whatever in what I would call pre-October 7th period in reality, and then the post, like 20 plus years later, or actually 20 years later, to see what they created out of Gaza, which was night and day difference. But any case, so the unit that we were in,
a much higher capability and
way higher. It was like, put it like this, it was like, so you had Hamas pre 2005 pullout, whatever they were, and then the post was Hamas on crack. Hamas times a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, it just...
Yeah, unfettered, undisrupted, and able to just grow exponentially.
Yes.
Got it.
Which was a surprise in somewhat way to us, was the level of their ability to arm themselves, to use the terrain and I mean every square inch of the terrain to their advantage. So to give people some perspective, the Gaza Strip is a small area, technically.
Yeah.
It's only 42 kilometers long.
Right.
And it's roughly, I think, like 12, 14 kilometers wide at its widest.
Right.
So it's a very small landmass.
Yeah.
In that landmass, you have over 600 kilometers of underground tunnel.
Wow.
Like, for those of you out there who have a little bit of a mathematical brain, unlike myself, just do the math.
Yeah.
That means everywhere where we put our feet, when we went in there, there's a terror tunnel on your feet, guaranteed. Not to mention, and including, the massive terror tunnel systems by the hundreds leading under the very massive defensive border with Egypt. The Egyptians built, by the way,
Yeah.
to protect against the Gazans, which
Right.
is something that the world doesn't seem to care about, that fence.
Right.
It's a very heavy fence, very heavily protected. And the irony is it's an absolutely, it's like a decoration.
Right.
Because under your feet in what's known as the Philadelphia corridor, which is basically a strip of road that is the border line between Egypt and Israel, and literally under your feet, the terrorists were smuggling weapons, humans, so sex slaves.
Yeah.
So Yazidi women, for example, were found. We had found these women that were held captive for years. Weapons, drugs, vehicles, you name it. Anything and everything, from humans to munitions to whatever, in and out these massive tunnel systems, like I said, by the hundreds leading into Egypt. And I didn't know this, but I spoke to a Sarah Adams style woman, who she's also a female, and she worked in the intelligence community here in the United States. And so she informed me through her work overseas in all these different countries. She informed me, she said, you realize that from the pullout from Afghanistan and all of the American weaponry and gear and training bases that were left behind, all of that was used to build up the Hamas capabilities.
Yep. And we've had this reported from multiple sources. In fact, I can remember getting calls, including from Legend, in the summer, prior to the attack, saying something is going down in Israel and the weapons from Afghanistan are making their way. And we passed that. You know, that was passed. And we'll come back to that because I do think there's a price to pay when indicators are missed.
Yep.
And
not just indicators. America, through that diplomatic move, love it or hate it, the fact is it opened the Pandora box for hell
100%.
to be unleashed on Israel.
Well said.
Okay?
Yeah,
I mean, that's
not
a
lost
fact.
on me. Yeah.
That is a fact.
Yeah.
You cannot ignore that. I don't care what political side of the spectrum you fall on. Facts are facts.
Well,
facts don't have feelings.
And that's something
you know
Sarah,
what I'm saying?
yeah, no,
Like,
and that's something Sarah and I talked about too, was like it unleashed a whole range of things, you know, that include Ukraine. There was, I think if it was Secretary Hegseth talked about that in his testimony recently for confirmation, but you know, so it did, it was a catalyst for a whole lot of things. So now so take us down to the micro of that day and walk us through.
So, exactly. So I would put it like this. So we were devastated, I would say, right? I mean, we were devastated because, again, like I was saying earlier here, I was trying to complete a sentence really, or a thought, is I know that my unit was prepared for a multi-front war.
Okay.
So that wasn't a shocker.
Yeah.
You know, Lebanon, Syria, all these countries, on a multi-front attack. That wasn't the shocker. The shocker was, because of what I just pointed out, is how these guys got, which we later found out through the intel we were gathering as we were going in the ground operations. We only then discovered the why, right? How was it that these guys could get armed and planned and do something on such a epic scale that wasn't prepared for? So
from your firsthand perspective, what Hamas presented that day was exponentially higher than what you guys expected, with attribution
and or
back
prepared
to
for.
the Afghanistan, the way we left Afghanistan, and what we left them with.
Yes.
Wow.
So we had. So as far as I know, we had no clue. I'm talking about the intelligence community, the generals of that area. So one of my teammates, he was a medic of my platoon, for example. He's one of the fallen soldiers in this war. So this young man tried to save my platoon commander that had gotten killed in combat when we had just finished our advanced training and then go up to do operations in Gaza. You're now an operational ready unit. And right as we started operations a few months into as young soldiers trying to learn how to fight and do missions in Gaza, we had a terrorist attack. My platoon commander went to engage with the terrorists and ended up getting shot and then eventually killed. But the medic who was trying to save his life, who was the platoon medic, he had been traumatized from that, had, survivor's guilt, myself included, by the way, because I was doing guard duty that night, and it was eating me up inside because I could hear the radio chatter, and I could tell that my buddies, who were my fellow teammates, who were in the opposite side pillbox. So they're in a pillbox on one side of the road. On the other side of the road is a base. Right. And so we're controlling the main strip of what's known as Kisufim Road, which is the main highway into Gaza back then, and the Jewish communities that were there. Long strip of road. And so I'm literally about 50 meters away from this whole gun battle, maybe less. And I hear the radio chatter, and I can tell they probably had fallen asleep in the pillbox. You can tell their answers are a little groggy from the ladies who are watching the cameras and notifying us and say, hey, there's somebody crawling in the sand. It looks like a terrorist. Any case, the whole handling of that scenario was done not so good, and it led to the death of two commanders, two officers. And the trauma of that was, like I said, for me, was just trying to get or get over the I could have done this or I could have done that. I could have left my post. I'm like, well, you can't leave your post, but it's, what I mean? It just eats you up. It's like, but I could, but he, on the other hand, unlike me, I mean, he had a legit hard connection to that death where he tried to save their lives, couldn't. So he had trauma after that, post-trauma, really hard, to the point where he couldn't do military service. Right. He then fought to get back into military service just as the war broke out. Wow. And he told his commanders, he said, I have to, because he went again, he did reserve duty up until 2014. 2014, he had more trauma, more horrible things, and that just tanked him. He couldn't go back. But when the war broke out, he fought as someone who has certification as basically handicapped mentally, right? For service. Wow. And so he fought against that, got the high command to let him in. And so he joined the Southern Command, which I'm just reading the book that's telling the story of that platoon or that division, and his story's in it of him where he got killed in this conflict. And the interesting thing in the story, I didn't know this because I'm not part of his unit. So October 7th, so October 6th, all of his generals and all of his officers and all of the high command of that battalion, the Gaza battalion, they go to meet with the Gaza general who's in charge of all of Gaza. And they're in Tiberias at a hotel with families and all. So it's kind of like a nice little vacation while the men do some work in between. And so they're sitting there in the conference room. The general's speaking to them, and he says, because they kept asking, well, we need reserve duty days. We need training days. We need this. We need that. And he goes, yeah, we'll take care of it. Oh, I take note. Oh, yeah. And basically kind of wrote him off, basically. And then he finishes with, there's no concern. We are in the safest, most secure position against Hamas, against whatever, than we've ever been. There will not be a Yom Kippur under our watch.
And this was on October 6th.
On October 6th.
Wow.
Little did he know that he was going to eat his words. Yeah. And the concerns of those officers was the same concern of that I had when I was part of the grunt units until I ended up in special forces with my unit, where it was a different dynamic. So again, we were prepared on a different level, if you will.
Yeah.
A little bit more, considerations of scenarios, but still with all of that, we had no clue of the capabilities that Hamas had acquired from the Taliban, from Afghanistan, both going through the tunnels, all the way over there, got trained, got orders, got everything, and armaments, and brought it right into the Gaza Strip, and then devastated us.
And this is what a lot of people, it just doesn't seem to resonate, Doron, that like not only were weapons and equipment present on October 7th from Afghanistan, but also the training that many of these fighters went through took place in the same NATO bases that I operated on, and that many people watching this operated on. And I think that is a really significant thing. But you're saying that from your perspective as well, that the training tactics, techniques, and procedures migrated from training camps in Afghanistan. And this is another point I want to make here, and this is where I think people are going to see the confluence of what we're talking about, is that if the assessments of Sarah and others are correct, that what we're hearing coming out of the out of Al Qaeda and other groups in Afghanistan, the same fighters or the same types of fighters that are here in the U.S. and are in Western Europe, trained in the same camps as the October 7 fighters and in the same approach to this local horrific interpersonal violence where people live and work and play. And I wonder if you could take us through that piece of October 7 and what from your lens and what happened there, so that we can kind of drive that home for what we might be seeing here.
So first of all, in my opinion, and this is again my opinion, I'm not an intelligence expert, but my personal opinion based on the intel I've seen, you're actually looking at operators that have more advanced training, first of all. So in other words, what you're going to be facing, and it's not a question of if, it's a question of when, because they will carry out their mission. What you will be facing is a much more refined combatant, much more committed combatant, for multiple reasons. For one, the Gazans are just plain lazy. It's their mentality. It's their culture. The combatants that are going to Europe and the United States, they're the cream of the crop. Okay? They're the tip of the spear. Like we have our tip of the spear, that's their tip of the spear. That's who's been sent here.
In fact, Sarah and others have asserted that even the date October 7 was selected not because of its significance in the conflict with Israel, but rather because it was the day that hostilities actually started for NATO forces and the U.S. against the Taliban and Al Qaeda. Following 9/11. Again, another thing that I don't think is widely understood is so even the date October 7
was specifically chosen.
It was specifically chosen, and it has American significance. So what's implied is that as horrible as what you all experienced on that day is actually a dress rehearsal for what's coming here.
It's sending a subliminal message for those who can read between the lines. So it's combined. It's a subliminal message to the United States because the date is specific to you, the Gregorian date. The Jewish calendar date was the high holiday of Simchat Torah. So it actually fell on a date where it was a combined relevance, a message to the Jews, just like on Yom Kippur, when you guys were in the synagogues praying and it was a holy day, and you're not near your phones, the religious ones at least, and you know what I mean? Then we get you, so to speak, with your guard down.
Right on. Okay.
And so we're doing that to take advantage of you because we play dirty, but we're also sending a message to the United States if they're smart enough to get it, which I'm pretty sure they were hoping you were. And thank God there are some folks here that did get it, and they're trying to voice that and let Americans know, hey, they're talking to us.
Right.
and we need to pay attention. So 100%, that is a message. And what they're going to do here is going to be very devastating. And honestly, the numbers that I see Sarah giving, I think those are very conservative numbers.
So let's build on it.
And that's lessons learned from October 7th.
Let's do that then. Let's take October 7 and then let's just through your lens.
Yeah.
Let's just build on that through conversation and see where we go.
So here was what we prepared for.
Yeah.
And these generals that of the Southern Command, because that in my unit is anywhere where the military needs us is where you go.
Yeah.
So we're more,
kind of a surge force.
Yeah, we're everything, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we're prepared for all contingencies. But the ones who their main responsibility was the Gaza Strip, their plan, and the ones in the north, right? So you had two different contingencies. In the north, the northern units and command is prepared for the Radwan units that are basically a unit that goes into Israel. Their whole purpose is to go into Israel, infiltrate, go into communities, hold people hostage, slaughter people, create chaos, basically, right? So, in other words, take over a Jewish community, right? So we're aware of those guys, and that's their plan. And at best, in our minds, maybe one community, max two Jewish communities. In the south, the same idea. Okay, the Nukhba terrorists, we know they exist. We have the intel. We see them preparing. We see them training for some big deal. So we knew they were cooking something up.
Right.
What we did not know was the magnitude.
Right.
We underestimated their capabilities and the magnitude. That's what that general said as well. Worst case scenario, they'll kill a few Israelis, a few, hold hostage, and the military will do our job as we know how to do, which, well, how are you going to know it? Because you haven't even trained, and all these reservists haven't trained for years is what they said.
Right.
How are you going to, what I'm saying? As a military person, you know full well, especially combat, you can't just act out of lack of training and repetition, and that it becomes muscle memory and you just do it. They didn't have that to work for their advantage. Yeah. So the enemy knows this, and that's the thing. We also underestimated how much the enemy is watching us, which just personally pisses me off, because for years, myself and my team of guys, we're kind of those weirdos who are extreme in preparedness, self-training. Yeah. No one is coming.
Right.
It's us. The buck stops with you. Do not expect the military to get you supplies or weaponry or whatever, what you need to carry out the mission. Prepare for any contingency. Right. Be prepared for anything. Right. Right. And so we took our job, extra serious, so to speak, and went the extra mile in our training. Yeah. And implemented, for example, we implemented drone attacks because we're watching what's happening in Ukraine. Okay, so they're using drones, possibly the enemy, and we thought actually Lebanon at the time. We underestimated Hamas. Probably the Radwan units will use drones, so we'll implement this into this training exercise. Yeah. So we did a few things that were most of the military, as far as I know, I don't think anyone else was doing that. That was our own initiative. We would take apart a conflict wherever it's happening, the current ones. What are the tactics being used? What are the techniques being used?
Break it down and look at best practices.
And then we weren't as shocked as a lot of the soldiers when drones are dropping mortars on soldiers.
I want to come back to that bottom-up work that you guys did, because I think that's really important for us to clock here in the U.S.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Please continue.
So the bottom line really is, even as a soldier, it's up to you. Don't expect the command to think up what you need. Right. You know what? If your main commander, who's in charge of that training exercise, if he's the one doing the write-off, just talk to him. Yeah. If he's on the same page like our commander, hey, he'll put that into the training exercise that is the written up one that they want you to do, and you just got to think outside the box and add it into the training. Don't expect the military or the law enforcement to give you ammo to go shoot, for example. Yeah. I know you guys don't train enough. Yeah. I know that the departments, not because they want, but essentially they don't have the resources to give their law enforcement officers range time and ammo to train on the level that what they'll be engaging in the streets.
So I wonder if we could.
So do your own training.
Yeah, exactly.
Invest your own money. But a lot of people are cheap, and we get this all the time. We get made fun of. Oh, you buy your own gear? Yeah, I buy my own gear. You buy your own. You train all this out and all this money on ammo. Yes, sir. I do. You think it's a waste of time? I know you think that.
Yeah.
And guess what happened when the war broke out and when all hell went loose? Everybody who was making fun of us for being the weirdos, all of a sudden, hey, where'd you get those shoes?
Yeah.
Hey, where'd you get that kit?
Yeah.
Hey, how can you show? Like, I see how you guys are, manipulating your weapon differently than the rest of us. What's that sling? Why you have it like that and not like this?
Yeah.
All of that. All of a sudden, everybody knows who's the guy that knows.
Yeah.
That you now need to learn from all of a sudden.
So I wonder then if we could, because that's where I want to really take this ultimately, and it's something that we really hit on hard with lessons learned and best practices. But I think hearing from you, your experience on that day and what you saw will really drive home the lessons you just said, because I want to come back to those and the self-initiated best practice analysis that you all did. Yeah. But can you build it on what the events of that day were and what you saw?
So what I saw is I was asleep. I was asleep in my home up in the Judean hills. I live right by where King David fought Goliath. Samson lived just down the road from me. Yeah. So that's essentially the makeup of where I'm living, kind of like the North Carolina hills, but Israel, much smaller in size and whatever. And so I'm up there in my rural kind of country style home, asleep. It's a high holiday, and the house is shaking, and it's like, and my wife is waking me up because I actually had a cold. And so she like jerks me awake. She's like, honey, there's something wrong. I'm like, what are you like, what is your deal? Like, leave me alone. And she's like, no, there's something wrong. And I was like, then I started to realize I'm waking up. I'm like, oh, okay. And I look over my phone. We don't use our phone on Shabbat. And it's a high holiday. So I see the phone is just off the hook on the message, and it's my unit message. Right. And I'm going, okay, there's something weird here. Yeah. This isn't just the guys having chit chat on Shabbat, the non-religious guys. And I was like, okay. So I take my phone, I open it up, and the nightmare scenario. They're attacking from here. My buddy is, one of our friends just took out 2 terrorists in his own home, the one who trained. They were just target practice. Right. Just target practice. The other ones who had a gun but didn't train, it's a toss up. Yeah. Right. You see the footage of the Nukhba terrorist on the doorbell thingy with the camera when they're trying to get into a house, and I'm going, is this an Iranian cyber attack? Right. Like, what the heck? Because I knew that they had those capabilities. Because again, we just think the terrorists, whatever, they don't have hacking capabilities. Of course they do. And so I'm going, you're trying to make it make sense out of it, and like, this doesn't make sense. Right. And then the guys say, my commander says, look, we haven't gotten our orders, but whoever wants to show up and come to our rally point, you're welcome to come, pack up your gear, and let's go. And so at a macro level, what that morning, if I could tell me if I'm close here, but somewhere around 6:30 local AM, rockets, 6:30 aerial attack, and all over Israel, and then by 7 o'clock. Terrorists are crossing the line of departure from Hamas or from Gaza into the kind of the frontier area there along the the strip. Yeah, and then information starts to streamline towards everywhere. Yeah, and just one other big piece that I know you'll make your way to, but I want to kind of set it up here is there's a multi-day music festival going, and, right. And so you had said to me that these terrorists initially had a long range goal that they were pushing towards, hoping for secondary and tertiary responses from others in the area that would respond. That's right. But this multi-day kind of trance music festival, Nova, was going on in an open field, and the terrorists did not know this. Correct. And then got word of it, clocked it, and actually turned around really for just straight up bloodlust. Opportunity. Yeah. Yeah. So please. Targets of opportunity.
So you're awake now. You're getting this phone is scrolling.
Getting my gear, throwing my family into the bomb shelter.
Yeah.
And explosions are still going overhead. I get in my car. The sirens are going off. I'm like, I gotta get to base. So if a rocket hits me, it hits me. You know, I mean, tough. So I race to base, pick up one of my buddies on the way, and then you start to see the intel that's streaming now on all the, because Israel's a small country.
Yeah.
We're very communal.
Yes.
And so the information just spreads like wildfire.
Yes. Very flat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm going, oh my God, they're going into homes. None of my family's trained. I'm the only defender in my whole family.
Yeah.
My wife's parents are there. Her brother, who has 5 kids, my wife, and our 3 kids.
So you're rolling into the fight,
knowing
while your family is completely exposed.
Is completely exposed, and God forbid terrorists come there, I'm going to burn down Gaza.
Yeah.
That's going to be my resolve.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because God forbid that happens.
Yeah.
I don't know how I'm going to react to this.
Right.
But it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah.
It's not going to be rational.
Yeah.
To my, what I can assume. And that was hard. So we get to the paratrooper base because my unit is part of we just created this new specialty unit for the paratrooper battalion, the enlisted guys, not the reservists, because the paratroopers also have a reserve unit and so on, or a few different, but in any case. So we get there, and these young kids are the first ones sent to the front lines. Right. And as we're getting there, Blackhawks are taking off, and they're coming down, getting another batch off, back and forth, just getting as many of our specialty guys, the tip of the spear of our guys, basically the reconnaissance of the paratroopers, and getting them there, getting them to Be'eri, getting them to the Nova. It's like Sderot, the police station Sderot just got devastated. So remember, like I said, nobody's coming, and that that better than I think most. That is not just a saying,
right?
It's not just a statement. It literally depends on you. Yeah. You need to prepare. Right. Don't look for the officers to come and save you, because they're not. Because
they were the police stations were assaulted.
They were assaulted, and guess what's going to happen here? Yeah, they will take out your defenders. Right. Your first responders.
Yeah, first thing they're going to do.
And this is another important point. The civilians, right? For those who are going to heed this advice, go get training, and don't go to your local gun shop and the instructor. I mean, no disrespect, but I used to work at Patriot Outdoors in Clovis, New Mexico, with one of the top gun instructors in the country. Today he's in Arizona. And he's a great dude, right? But we have seen a lot of instructors coming and going that don't know what the heck they're doing. Yeah. They are reckless. Yeah. And endanger people's lives and basically essentially replicate bad behavior with weaponry and all that. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, don't just assume because it says instructor on his T-shirt, the guy knows what he's doing. Yeah. If you have a Green Beret buddy, a SEAL, a Marine, anybody who's been in combat, paratroopers, Army, anything like that, anyone who's done active duty of any kind, go to them and say, hey, where do you train? Right.
That's good advice. Yeah.
Where do you train?
Yeah. And
can you recommend and show me the ropes? Right. And latch onto that like your life depends on it.
Because it does.
Because it does.
Yeah.
Because it does. So it's not a joke. It's not recreational.
Right.
Folks, your life depends on it. Get the darn training right now. Don't wait till tomorrow. Don't procrastinate, I think is the word. Go get the training. Yeah. Your life depends on it.
Solid advice, man.
And don't just get a weapon and learn how to shoot with weapons. You need to be able to make holes, plug holes. Make sure you know how to do not first aid kits, trauma kits.
So take us to
So that's essential.
yeah, and so with that guidance,
Yeah.
take us to some of the things that you encountered that day that make that point, if you can, to the degree that you can.
Yeah.
I mean, what I want to try to do is I'm trying to just paint enough of a picture, that we understand that the guidance you just gave about making holes and plugging holes, is not arbitrary.
No,
it's based on lived experience.
Yes, sir.
From individuals who trained in the same place that we're talking about, the folks here probably trained, and with the same approach that is going to be used here. So if you can paint that picture for us and have the generosity to do that for us, I think that will more than anything else set us up to make kind of those final observations.
I'll say it's not going to be the same as October 7th. The difference is the advantage they have, it's with lessons learned from October 7th.
Yeah.
Just like we're learning lessons, they're learning, and they're going to tweak their strategy and tactics. So, like I said, what you're going to face, it's a whole different animal. Yeah. Both the operative themselves and the tactics themselves are going to be a little bit different. So you really need to start getting ahead of the curve and try to think out
100%
different scenarios. So the military's not going to make it to you.
Yeah.
Law enforcement's not going to make it to you. And if you do end up engaging with these terrorists or encountering them, another very important threat, I don't think I've heard anyone talking about this, but this is what I know was, for me, something I had to keep an eye out for.
Yeah.
We learned, like I said, all this information's coming in, that they are dressing like IDF soldiers,
right,
and or law enforcement,
right,
and or ambulance.
So this is what you're hearing as you're coming in.
So they're in disguise.
That they're dressed, and I've seen this in other reporting, that they're dressed like security forces.
Yes, and they were.
Okay.
And they threw us off.
Of course.
The operators.
Yeah.
Okay. So as I'm hearing this, I'm going, oh my God. So like I said, I went to pick up my buddy first. He lives in central Israel, one of the bigger cities. And as I'm driving, it's like a ghost town, like almost nobody on the road. And then I see a checkpoint. And I go, okay. So I get my weapon and I'm ready for a gunfight.
Yeah.
That needs to be in your head.
Yeah.
This could be a trick.
Yeah.
You need to be ready for a gunfight.
Yeah.
It's not, well, it looks like police. I don't care. They took the police vehicles. They took the IDF vehicles. They took their kit, and they literally, like Hitman or whatever, the guy who's always, putting up disguises. That's what they're doing.
Right.
They're smart. They're not stupid. And they will, if they can entrap you, they will entrap you. The booby traps that they set up teddy bears, backpacks with traps, because you as a sympathetic father or husband or, who has kids, you see that on the ground and you see people that have been tortured to death in the worst horrible ways. I'm not going to give exact details, but for those who claim that the beheadings of these babies was fiction, you can go to hell. Because I saw, and my men saw.
I'm sorry, brother.
The worst nightmare of nobody should see that. Yeah, so go to hell. You think that we're making stories up because we want sympathy? Oh, bro. No, we're not Palestinians. It's not Bollywood. In fact, you don't hear half of what happened because we don't want the world's sympathy. What we want is for the world to get off our back and let us get retribution for what was done to us, get our hostages back, eliminate the threat of Hamas and Lebanon with the Hezbollah, the Houthis, Iran, whoever is threatening our livelihood. Just let us get rid of the threats. Let us do our job to protect our people. That's what we want. Yeah. We don't want sympathy. We don't want the U.S. military to come in here with your aircraft carriers and your big guns and your fancy gear and our American awesomeness. No, thank you.
Right.
You know what? We know that we don't have the greatest of everything. We know that we're under-equipped, undermanned, under all that. Just let us defend ourselves with what we got.
Yeah.
We're not looking for handouts. We're looking for go ahead. Because unfortunately, Israel is in such of a position with having that relationship we have with the United States as our ally, should be, that we have to respect your wishes in the Middle East, because what affects us affects you.
Right.
And we respect that. But it's a one-way door.
Yeah.
You don't respect us. And that hurts. And that sucks. And that's what it felt like.
Right.
Is it we're trying to do our job with our hand tied behind our back, because the United States says, show restraint.
Yeah.
Don't act irrationally. You better believe we know how to act rationally in that, because we all did.
Yeah.
We all stepped up to the plate with all the horrors that we saw, and we didn't go out and execute retribution of, I'm going to do the same to you. No. If you threw it on your arms, we're going to take you and we're going to arrest you, and you're going to get due process.
Right.
And be treated like a human being.
Which is
unlike what you did to us.
100%. And it's something that I know that I've tried to make clear on this end as well, that the level of surgical strike that you guys did following that was pretty damn restrained, considering.
Yes.
And I wonder, Doron, if you can take us as you came up on the aftermath, because what I'm really trying to get at here is not the grotesqueness of it to the degree that you feel comfortable. What I want folks to understand was the local nature of this attack and the specificity of where people live, work, and play.
Here's the crazy thing. Almost everybody, all of my friends that I know personally, my personal friends and family, almost everybody knew someone who died in the Nova. It was crazy, because I remember thinking about this for months. What are the odds? What are the chances that all of those who went to that Burning Man style nature party, for the listeners who
because that's what it was.
Because that's what it was. Yeah. It was just trance and music and drugs and alcohol and the whole party life fun that people like to do. And so they're literally there in the middle of a nature reserve, by the way. Yeah. Just adjacent to the Gaza border, and the Jewish communities there, by a kibbutz, Be'eri, which was one of the ones that was the most devastated. And so after essentially seeing the first horrors, once we eventually got to our orders and got our gear and all that stuff, it was a lot of delay. It took so much time, and we were frustrated because we were all there. Before we got our orders, we were already there. And then, of course, we got our green, V of, okay, you got your orders, and we can start arming you and getting you your gear and your orders of what our mission should be. We get to the communities, and we see burnt cars everywhere for miles. Yeah. For miles, charred cars, bodies burnt to, and all that stuff, carnage, etc. And this is in your home. Yeah. This is in your suburban neighborhood. Right. In your city. Okay. This is where it's happening. Yeah. The enemy took the fight to us. Yeah. The enemy took it to what we hold dear. Yeah. And love. And what that did to us as the warfighter who's used to fighting, again, we do fight close to home relative to y'all, so it's a different dynamic. Sure. But I go and fight the enemy where he's at, not in my backyard. Right. And so psychologically, that was devastating. Yeah. And there's a word, mizazeh, and I don't know how to say it in English, but it was like, oh my God, right? Like you're in shock. Yeah. You're in shock. Yeah, you're fighting falling apart, really. You're fighting falling apart. Yeah. Keeping your cool. I mean, all of us. And listen, my team, they're one of the best teams in the IDF reserves, par none. Yeah. Okay? I mean, you hear of all these legendary teams or whatever. This is it. It's a tight-knit group of guys. Yeah. every one of us comes from a different military background,
Yeah.
special units and whatnot. Each of us have at least 2 decades.
Hand selected.
Hand selected.
Yeah.
Literally hand selected, actually. That's right. That's also why the military doesn't know how to, the normal military doesn't know how, like, who are these guys?
Right.
Because we don't have to serve together.
Right.
We chose to serve together, and we're on a different page with all of that advantage that we have.
Yeah.
And like I said, and with our extracurricular training that we chose to do for ourselves,
Yeah.
we were not prepared for that.
Right.
Nobody's prepared for that. And I think that's the most important message for everyone who is listening. I don't care if you're Delta, Team 6, MARSOC, whatever, okay? You can be the hardest, most seasoned warrior there is, carried out some most complex missions. I'm telling you, our Tier 1 operators and units were devastated.
Yeah.
Devastated. One of my teammates, he comes from Yamam. Yamam is like, they're the ones that did the hostage rescue, which in my book, and it's historically correct, that is the most insane hostage rescue that has ever been done in history.
Yeah.
And so these are the guys who were able to achieve the impossible. They were overwhelmed on that day. Everybody was overwhelmed. Huge casualties for our top tier units. All of us were devastated. Nobody could have prepared for this.
Yeah.
Your advantage here in America that you have that we didn't have is I'm telling you
Right now.
what to prepare for.
Right now.
That's your
Yeah.
advantage.
And that was honestly, and thank you for making the drive to get here and for re-experiencing this for the benefit of folks watching this who just want to just take a practical, informed approach to, even if there's a 30% chance that these assessments coming from Sarah and Legend and others are accurate based on your lived experience and that of your brothers and sisters, this is an opportunity to look into the operations that are in place and to take some very, very hard lessons, some hard truths.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we've established what the local nature of this was, what the impact of this, but this resulted in that basically a massacre at a outdoor concert.
Yep.
Young people hiding in bunkers with grenades rolled in there and just apocalyptic
proportions.
Yeah. And so a gathering, but then also in residential areas where people are in their homes with their children.
Yep.
And I've talked to folks that have told me that these terrorists were dressed as IDF, as police, comforting children while taking their parents out.
Yep.
In front of them.
Forgive me. This is an important point. I wrote it down on my notes as I was thinking about it because I've been listening to all of the folks that are really doing their job to inform the masses here. One point that I think is important to understand, like I said, is the thing about dressing like the law enforcement, whatever. It's not just them that do it. The Oslo terror attack, where that dude went and slaughtered all these kids from a political group thing, and so his thing was political. He dressed as a police officer.
Yeah.
And he looks like them, right? He doesn't look like a Taliban.
Right.
And he goes, come here. I'll help you. Come here. That's what these terrorists did, because unlike in Norway, Israelis aren't all white.
Right.
We have Middle Eastern Israelis, we have Asian Israelis, whatever. So these terrorists look very similar to our Middle Eastern Jews.
Yeah.
And they use their Hebrew and tried to speak without an accent to try to confuse us and fool us to say, hey, come here. And they did that.
Right.
And then, of course, slaughtered these folks that bought into the bait.
Right. So a major takeaway.
Yeah. So they're not necessarily Taliban,
right.
You know what I'm saying? Like Arab looking.
Yeah, it's not this assumption
like
that
what you have stereotypically in your head.
That's right.
He could be a white dude from Europe. And by the way, I confronted one of these guys from Poland. He was hating on me online. I said, bro, if you think you're that tough online, meet me in person and talk to me like you're doing right now.
Right.
The dude called me on it. He's an MMA fighter, all this stuff. Met me in Jerusalem. I said, I'll meet you at a cafe. We can sit down and talk and sit down and have a coffee, and we meet face to face. And then we'll see if you want to talk aggressive to me like that.
Yeah.
Turns out this dude's a Polish dude who converted to Islam and had all this propaganda crap in his head. And I sat down and I just set him straight. I said, well, okay, go ahead. That's your accusation. Well, here are the facts. And here are the, and I was like, let's go in the old city and I'll show you.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden the guy ironically became my friend. Right. But point being is, you think a terrorist is a stereotypical what we see on movies. This dude was a terrorist.
Right.
Guess what happened later? He instigated violence up on the Temple Mount, got arrested and deported. But he's a white dude.
Yeah.
European.
Yeah. Yeah.
You think those guys that are here are not that?
Right.
You're wrong. They are. I guarantee it.
What would you say to individuals watching this? Because I get that a lot. It's just, I get a lot of questions as a parent, as an individual. What are some takeaways that you would just say to folks that didn't serve in the military, didn't serve, but that we are looking at, in the event of a localized complex attack like this, and of course we hope that never happens. But in the for folks that are wondering what can they do as individuals, what would you just a couple of things you would tell them?
Make sure that when the power grid goes down, that you have an ability to have light, right? To have heat if you're in an environment that you'll freeze and die. Anything that operates off of electrical grid, you need to have a answer to that if it goes down.
Yeah.
Okay. Generator, whatever. That's what I have.
Right.
You need to make sure you have enough food and water to last you for at least a week, in my opinion, if not more. Right. But let's say bare minimum, a week.
Yeah.
Because it took us at least a week to get to some of these families.
Wow.
I mean, I don't know if it was an exact week, but I mean, in some cases,
but you're talking
it took days till we got to where people were.
Well, look at what happened in Western North Carolina with Hurricane Helene. I don't know if you saw that, but it took a very long time to get there, and that's not uncommon. And this is something that in Al Qaeda 2.0, the analysts talk about there, and I think it's something that you've alluded to here is systemic paralysis of first responders and military forces is almost a foregone conclusion.
Yeah.
An assumption that you make in something like this, because it's going to be, if they achieve even a mild level of surprise, then they're going to paralyze the response.
Yes.
Fair statement?
Yes.
So you're
100%.
talking about like a week.
Yeah. And if you have a safe room, like most Israelis have, a bomb shelter, you need to make sure that that door on the safe room cannot be accessed from the outside.
Okay.
And that you can lock it from the inside without putting your hand on it. Okay. Because parents fought to the death hanging on that door, which is not bulletproof. Yeah. And the terrorists shot through and killed the parents. Wow. Okay. So think of that contingency. Okay.
And something else you brought up as you were driving away going into the fight, and I can't imagine what that must have been like for you, continuing the fight, seeing the horror, and knowing your family's behind you.
Yes. And that the terrorists, and that I find out later from my Imam friends, the terrorists are on their way to Jerusalem. Wow. And my house is on the way to Jerusalem.
So what lessons for yourself did you take away in terms of the preparation of your own family and anything there?
So that is what we did, is all the advice I just gave right now, that when they're in their shelter, they have all of what they need to sustain themselves for a long haul standoff. Yeah. Until things quiet down. Yeah. And that the enemy cannot access you in your safe room from the outside. Oh, you don't have to look very far. Just watch 13 Hours. Yeah. Okay. Benghazi. The ambassador was in his safe room. Right. What did they do? They smoked him out. Right. So, I mean, we think we're clever. We think we're smart. I mean, I work in the industry of security and defense and all that. Yeah. So we always think that we have some perfect plan, but even for the best implemented plan that you can conceive, there's always a breach. Right. And the enemy is always going to find a way to get you to inflict pain on you or hurt you in one way or other. So you just basically, you need to prepare for and think of any scenario where you could become vulnerable, and
Yeah. Yeah.
That will take you a long way.
So I want to recap a little bit here and just bring it. So we've talked about, because you said something really important just now, which is scenario-based training. And this is something that I really believe is so important because, while it is upsetting to think that any human is capable of something like this, particularly atrocities against civilians like this, where, children and women, but the reality is that it is a very real thing. There is a very recent precedent for it, and there is at least a reasonable assessment that it could happen in the United States. And so scenarios like what you see in Al-Qaeda 2.0, what you've laid out here, you're traveling the country talking to folks about what's out there. So we have access to scenarios that can inform law enforcement, first responders, city officials, families, communities. It's available. It's not classified. It's there. And so in our frustration, when we feel like, what do I do? What do I do? The first thing I always say is look at the scenarios. Step back, look at the scenarios, talk to people, and start to have conversations and let the scenarios inform what you do as an individual, what you do as a community, how you interact between community and law enforcement. So, I mean, you've already given us...
get to know them very well.
So that's my next thing
build that relationship. Let them know you care, that they're there.
Oh, so good.
Because most law enforcement, both in Israel and in the States and in most places I've been in Western countries, they basically feel like they're shat on, to put it plainly. Like nobody cares about them.
Well, look at what's happened in this country in the last couple of years.
People get angry because they get a ticket or whatever. What you don't know is that there's law enforcement officers that save babies' lives who are choking to death.
Absolutely.
Because they have the training, they have the MT training, they have, So there's many scenarios that you don't see online that smears the law enforcement as a bunch of thugs and whatever. Let them know that you respect them, that you value them, and that when you have that relationship as well, guess what? Their incentive to come after you is much higher. Because I know Bob. Well, Bob's a great dude. He keeps, sending me notes and giving me gifts or whatever it is to make them feel appreciated. Think how you can do that to make that person valued and an asset to you.
We have a saying, and this whole podcast is about connect like your life depends on it, right? And we have a saying.
It does.
We have a saying in Special Forces that you build trust when risk is low, and you leverage it when the stakes are high.
Right. That's
and if you think about it, that's absolutely true. I mean, I think that's why a lot of our volunteers were able to help get people out of Afghanistan, because they had 20-year relationships that the minute something happened, or just like when your reserve unit, when that call comes, you guys have built the trust when risk was low. And so you leverage it when the stakes are high. The same with a community. If you have a pre-existing relationship with law enforcement, first responders, and there's dialogue around these hard topics, then when the stakes go up, that social capital is there. If you are, disconnected from the state, from the first responders, from the people that you kind of count on, then in that moment, when the crisis is just going to exacerbate the distance. Right. So I wonder if we could pivot. We're kind of getting towards the end here, but you've given a great advice on individuals for training, really not just getting the weapon, but training on the weapon, training in the scenarios, letting the scenarios inform your equipment, how you protect your family. You've given great advice on safe rooms. So now let's broaden it to the communities, because one of the things that I keep hearing from our Israeli brothers and sisters is that, a lot of these communities had a frontier mindset, like they've lived this experience. I mean, and even with that, there was a level of kind of, it won't happen here, Our communities are in no way mentally or spiritually prepared for that level of audacity and close interpersonal violence. So what advice would you give communities as a collective to work together, work with law enforcement, and to navigate this problem now? Because I know you're going out talking to them. So what would you say? And because you don't have to have a title, it could be a leader of a synagogue or a church or a PTA. But what would you say to these community leaders that are trying to just do the right thing ahead of time and be pragmatic and responsible? What would you say to them about how to prepare and work on this?
So this is this is something that I've actually been preaching for years to churches where I usually get invited to come and speak. They want to learn about Israel. I addressed this multiple times, many times. Byron Rogers, for example, is one of the guys who is preaching the same thing where he lives in California to the church where he goes to and so on, which is you need to have a security, how would you say, plan, a security plan, a security team for your church, your synagogue, your mosque,
maybe your neighborhood.
Your neighborhood. So if it's a faith group that would potentially be attacked because of their religion, and some psychopath that wants to target them, you need to have a contingency plan. Not Mike over here is I get this all the time, and it's no disrespect, right? Yeah. But it's like they're so naive, and they go, oh, he's got 20 years in law enforcement. Oh, he's in the detectives department. Oh, and they just assume this guy's going to be Rambo.
Right.
And I'm like, listen, I'm a trained professional, particularly in this field. And I'm telling you, just because you're a cop or you have military background doesn't cut the mustard.
Can I weigh in on that for just a second?
Sure.
Just one thing.
Yeah.
Is just that one of the things that we've talked a lot about is, facing against individuals who are prepared to fight to the death.
Yeah.
Right. As an 8 to 10 person team.
Yep.
They're prepared to do that. And that's not something any law enforcement is, even if it's an active shooter, maybe one. But when you're talking 8 to 10 that are prepared to fight to the last round, one of the things that we've put forward in the Gathering Storm Project is, whether it's law enforcement or a community, is and you said this too, is asset visibility on global war on terror veterans who fought in Ramadi, who fought in Fallujah, who have dealt with ISIS, who fought in Syria. They're out there, and local associations can help connect you to them, but involving them at a private-public partnership kind of way, because you all do that.
Yes,
exactly. And it's a foregone conclusion that you work together as private-public sector, and your veterans are a critical part of the conversation. Exactly. I don't think we have that here right now. We have a whole generation of global war on terror veterans who are recently...
Those are assets.
Very much strategic assets, but I do not think there's a level of inclusion and integration with them in law enforcement and just community plans. And I think it's something we should. Your thoughts on that?
And that's exactly why I try to tell them. I'm like, listen, your mindset is because this guy's a cop, then you got it. It's covered.
It's covered. We're good.
And he made the plan for the security team in the church.
Right.
And maybe one or two of them are armed.
Right.
That terrifies me.
Right.
I don't tell them that because it's, but it's terrifying because I'm like, okay, if something's going to happen, they're going to kill people.
Yeah.
They don't know it yet, but they're going to kill people because they're not trained for those scenarios. And like you pointed out, they never fought a terrorist, most likely. Again, I'm not belittling anybody.
Yeah.
God bless you for your service in the police and all the crud you have to eat to do your job. I highly respect y'all. I mean, don't get this wrong, please. But what I'm saying is the civilians have a false sense of security through looking at them, assuming
it's covered.
It's covered.
Right.
When I know full well, because this is my field of expertise, I'm like, it's not covered.
And then
it's not covered.
The other thing too, Doron,
and I asked them, and that's actually why I asked them. I said, do you have any like special forces guys?
Right.
Former or active that are, that go to your church? Go to your synagogue, and they're, oh yeah, there's that one guy, and that's the funny thing, and this is kind of our fault. And I know here it's a little bit different, but in Israel we are more connected with the community and whatever. But I think one of the big problems with a lot of veterans when they come back home, they kind of isolate themselves because you can't relate to the other people around you.
Yeah,
I felt that.
Yeah.
I know that.
Yeah.
And then you don't plug into the community.
Man, so well said.
And then therefore you're actually cheating your community out from what you have to bring to the table.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, that's really solid. And it's absolutely true.
And how do you get me out of my box? Approach me, be nice to me, right?
Yeah.
Win me over, which is what Green Berets do, right? You win hearts and minds. Win my heart and mind, right? Find out what I like. Maybe I like to go fishing.
Yeah.
Hey, Doron, you want to go fishing with me? Trust me, I got plenty of great friends here. They'll tell you we're like family. They know what I like.
Yeah.
And I will fight to the death to help them if, God forbid, something happens. And you know what I'm saying? So there's that relationship. So the more you stay in your own little bubble,
Yeah.
it's gonna bite you in the butt.
It goes
in the
both
long
ways.
term.
It goes both ways, and it's something at Task Force Pineapple that we're really big on in our nonprofit is this aspect of veteran reintegration, military community reintegration, right?
Yeah.
And one of my buddies that did a study on veterans coming home from war, he said that most veterans don't need medication, they don't need therapy. What they need is a deep connection with their neighbor.
Yep.
They need to hear their stories heard without judgment.
Yep.
And then they need to walk that path of healing and reintegration with their neighbor together.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, that is a really helpful way to think about community when it comes to bringing our veterans home. And
Yes.
and one of the so your statement I think really drives that home, but also just doing that because it's the right thing to do. Like bringing our veterans back into the fold. These are men and women who have tremendous capability. Not that our law enforcement don't, but to add to not just this kind of threat, but just to the social capital and the fabric of the society, but also to the veterans and the military family members. It's also on us to reintegrate as well.
Yes.
And also make that outreach. But in this specific case,
because we come across horrible.
we can. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not saying all, but you have those veterans that are talking military jargon and are very, and the civilians like, oh my God.
I mean, that's why we
they're
do our
terrified.
play.
Like,
That's,
oh, okay, sir. Like, I'm out of this class.
and they're not sure, and they're, and that's why we do our play last out. When we tour with it, we do the play, and people watch it with veterans on stage.
Yeah.
But then we do a talk back.
Yeah.
And it's amazing after the civilians sit with the veterans together and the Gold Star families, and they watch veterans on the stage live the life of a military family back and forth to Afghanistan. The civilians are wrecked. Yeah. And they're like, I had no idea a military spouse goes through that.
My poor wife.
But the conversation that happens, this is where I'm going.
Yeah.
The conversation that happens in the room after the play is this deep sense of connection as a community. And what I'm trying to get at here, I believe, is that in my time in Special Forces, working in rough spots around the world, the ultimate antibody to what we're talking about here is a resilient community.
Yes, 100%. And that is the secret sauce of the Israeli. You want to know what our secret sauce is? We're not a better warfighter. We're not better trained, better equipped. It's our community that we have built throughout decades of pogroms, of persecution, etc. That's why Jews are still alive today. It's both God, the Bible, community.
Yeah.
And that we integrate those. And that's the secret sauce.
And we're struggling today as a society here in the United States for any sense of community. 2/3 of Americans don't trust their neighbor, according to Gallup.
Sadly,
and so what happens a lot of times is, yes, people come together in a crisis, but if we can't come together now before the crisis occurs, then our ability to demonstrate collective capacity. To secure our daycares, to secure vulnerable, elderly areas, which these guys are targeting. Right? For the same reasons you cited.
Soft, easy targets.
If we can't come together as a community now and have conversations with law enforcement, such as, what do we do about terrorists wearing law enforcement uniforms? How do we actually identify friend or foe? You got to have that conversation now.
Yes.
But if your focus as a community is keeping the police, as you said, at arm's length and defunding them, or just not having conversations like this with them, then we have a problem. Now, the one good thing I will say, Doron, thanks to you and Sarah and Sean Ryan and others, is that I can't tell you how many law enforcement officials reach out to me after every one of these shows.
That's
and
awesome.
I guarantee you after this one, it'll be a deluge. And what I would like to do is to continue to find ways to connect with them. Maybe you and I can collaborate on this and put you in touch with them. And
I'm on.
Because I think that's how it works, right?
I'm on a mission.
Yep.
And my mission is to help Americans be prepared for what we went through.
Yeah.
I don't want to see that devastation happen to my family, because I am an Israeli, but I'm born as an American, first and foremost. My whole family is here.
Yeah.
It's just myself and my brother that grew up in Israel by ourselves, basically.
Wow.
And so
you there's a duality here of obligation.
Absolutely. And I care very much about how we can help. And I'm not the guy to go to, so to speak, but I know that with the cooperation with guys like you and other, like what we just said, people have that experience of fighting wars and that network that, and like you point out as well, really beautifully, it's that we, through our war experience, we know how to come together.
Yeah.
And we know how to get things done.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm saying, yes, let's collaborate. Let's share our experiences and build plans, build the communities, build the responses. And last thing, by the way, for the community leaders, if you're a rabbi or a pastor, et cetera, or a spiritual leader of your community, you, in my opinion, you need to reach out to your local authority, right? The local government authority. That's if it whatever it takes to get the budget for your first responders, police officers, and so on, and to create teams, security teams, because what I call a first responder, it's not what you guys call first responder. That's what we have in our communities. Is we have people that their job is to be that security element who has a like a Toyota Hilux, and they have a weapon that is issued for their job. They have body armor, they have helmets, they have nods, they have everything. I mean, kitted out, and get them kitted out with the best gear and the best training. Guess what? They are going to be the ones that will be the liaison between the law enforcement and the community, because they're in the community. They're of the community.
My biggest fear is that
make sense?
it makes total sense. My biggest fear is that we're going to have to learn this lesson after the fact, which I don't want to happen.
Yeah.
But I fear it because the things that we're talking about, require communities and individuals to get beyond their comfort zone, like right now.
And it's going to hit your pocket, by the way, because that costs.
Yeah, I've had a law enforcement official from the greater New Orleans area was reaching out to us after an interview with Sean that we did, and he was asking for training, and turns out this was before the attack on January 1 in New Orleans, and it got denied.
Oh.
And then here they are now dealing with this, and this I think happens a lot. But on the other hand, there are sheriffs out there. We're working with some right now in the state of Florida. They're all over this, and they are really leaning forward. And
this is a great state for
it. Really
exactly
is. And
this.
I think another thing that we can do is we can illuminate where this is working, where best practices are happening, and that spreads at a grassroots level. You don't need permission.
Poe County.
100%. In a lot of cases, there are those kinds of models that you can illuminate.
It's both the law enforcement and the local populace that are more security minded, and they arm themselves. And then, therefore, they have the least break-ins, the least. The crime is
right.
It hasn't changed since last I've been there.
It's still really effective.
They're still effective.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Last question I have for you, because a lot of what we're talking about requires a change in thinking in the government, senior leaders. We have an administration coming in right now that it looks like will be more responsive to this. Thank God.
Yeah.
But even that, like one of the things is like you have people, Sarah Adams, legend. These people are not in the intelligence community anymore.
Right.
They're veterans like me who got out 12 years ago. I'm a playwright, for God's sakes, right? Not exactly top choice for personnel rescue.
Right.
But I know that game. I lived that game. And I know that what we are sitting on right now with information that was given to us by very highly vetted individuals, well-placed individuals inside Afghanistan that we cultivated for 20 years who were abandoned by their handlers, 99% at scale, right? And so now these individuals, out of reciprocity, have provided information over the last 4 years that is telling us what you just said is going to happen here.
Yes.
My question to you is, so when you see that sometimes you get the eye rolls from the folks in the intelligence community, the learned folks who say that there's no way that this could happen, right? Who are you hearing this from? That's a tinfoil hat thing, right? But they forget the fact that the people that are saying this, are guys like me who just want our lives back. We didn't want to be involved in the Afghanistan withdrawal. We were drawn back into it out of loyalty and friendship and the fact that our government did not step forward.
And love for your fellow man.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so we just never hung up the phone.
Yep.
Right? So we've been on the phone with these folks, and we're trying to tell our leaders this is coming. But with that kind of reluctance to buy in, and folks that just kind of, like you said, shake their head and like, somebody's got this. What's the cost of hubris? I mean, you guys had warnings of gliders. You had warnings. You had weapons stolen from the communities. Like there were.
I
things
heard
being
nothing
said.
about gliders. That was a surprise.
Right.
None of my training and contingencies that we were prepared for had anything to do with gliders.
Right.
Not like that.
Right. But the point is, there were bits of information coming in at higher levels.
Correct. Yes. And it wasn't filtrating down.
That's my point.
So maybe they had it. The intel community had it.
Right.
We didn't have it.
Right.
And they were withholding it from us. And again, I don't want to get into conspiracies, but there's some people who they know their stuff. They're like the Sarah Adams of Israel. Okay. That have gone public through research, through her contacts and whatnot. And have made some very serious claims. Yeah. Now I have yet to vet it and get to the bottom of it, but I think people are sitting on the confessing that actually, that's what happened.
And I want to be really careful here too, in the sense that like what
I don't want to throw conspiracies out there.
No,
but I'm just saying,
what I'm saying is this:
people didn't do their job right. For sure.
What I'm saying is this: is that I've interviewed quite a few folks who were either survivors of October 7 or who were involved. Yeah. And what keeps coming up a lot is hubris. Yeah. Keeps coming up a lot.
What's hubris?
Hubris, a level of institutional arrogance of like, this couldn't happen. There's no way that they're ready to do this. Yeah. They're not capable of doing this, right? Mm-hmm. And so a dismissal of the information based on one's biases. Yes. Right. And so what I'm trying to do, I guess, here is to make the correlation that we have that same problem in the United States. We have a level of institutional dismissal, arrogance, and I can see where it's easy to do. Yeah. But what a shame it's going to be if the next attack on the homeland looks anything like what you've just laid out. Yeah. And our global war on terror veterans who fought this war for 20 years were trying to warn us. Yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is, what's your take on what's the cost of not paying attention to the indicators and the things that are easy to dismiss?
First of all, let's examine the evidence that has been laid out by Sarah and others. And by the way, I have some good friends that work in intelligence as well, right? And they concur everything that she's saying. By the way, she's not some kind of special breed of know-it-all. She's just saying what a lot of people know. Yeah, and she's voicing it in a very good way. Yeah. So take what she's saying. And I've heard what she has to say, and I'm going to be the chutzpah of an Israeli, so to speak, right? The audacity to question her assessment. I think she is giving a very conservative assessment, and I'll put it like this: just like we thought that it's going to be one community and just a few terrorists, if she says it's 1,000. Or 1,500. Let's say she go even more generous and say 2,000 of these well-trained combatives to carry out an October 7th attack with some extra tweaks and whatnot. Right? I'd put it in my opinion, it's way over 10,000. Yeah. Way over. Multiply that number is what I'm saying. Yeah. So let's start with that. Multiply that number, and I hope I'm wrong. Yeah. I hope I'm dead wrong. Yeah. But my lesson learned is don't look at the data and just assume that's what it's going to be. Right. Multiply it. I'll give you another example. In our training, just like you guys do, you do your op, you do your war scenario, and you know how they drop people that, like you're dead or you're wounded or you're this, right? And I don't know if you had this experience, but for me, it would piss me off. I'm like, dude, I was concealed, man. Like, there's no way that anybody got me, right? You have this kind of like it offended your ego. Yeah. And you didn't. And I learned later as when I got older that basically it had nothing to do with how slick and good I was. It just he just randomly picked you, and it doesn't matter. Right. The point is, I need 2 dead people, 3 wounded people, and whatever amputees for this scenario. Yeah. It's training, okay? Don't take it personal. Right. So what I'm saying is do that and eliminate 80%, 90% of the force, and now carry on. Wow. You want to do real life scenarios, and that's what I would like to I can help implement. I will put you in that scenario that we were put in.
I think one other thing
that's something that you're not ready for. I wasn't ready for.
We're not doing that. No, you're right.
You're not thinking that far.
No,
we're thinking about pieing. Right. We're thinking about cool tactics. Yeah. put that out of your head. The whole team goes down. You're the only one left.
And we're not thinking about systemic paralysis of responders not being able to get in the fray, a complete blurring of the lines, a complete violation of law of land warfare, where people are dressed like first responders and going into homes. You've talked about music festivals being attacked as a slaughter.
Yeah.
You've talked about neighborhoods being invaded and safe houses, where parents are trying to hold the door of the safe house and being shot through the door. So hopefully we've established the localized horrific level of this, of close interpersonal violence. And there's certainly scenarios there that allow law enforcement, communities, individuals. It's there for us.
Yes.
I think one other thing that you brought up is when you say you talked about this, the worst case scenario becomes the worst of the worst when you are in danger of falling apart.
Yes.
And I don't know how we're going to do this, but I think, and it's not for this venue, but there's going to have to be conversations with law enforcement and people that have to respond to this, that have to keep going. We've got to talk about trauma management, peer-to-peer trauma intervention, like what my buddy Dan does with Healing the Heroes. We're going to need, just in Western North Carolina, it overwhelmed first responders. There were bodies in the trees, and the trauma that those individuals were carrying just pushed down. It gets to the point you can't continue.
Correct.
So we're going to have to be thinking about trauma intervention, peer-to-peer. But what you said,
look for the signs and know what they are and all that.
The only way we can do that, because box cutters cutting the throats of flight crews before 9/11 was unimaginable. Now it's like, that's what they did. We're going to have to find a way to allow guys like you to tell us the stories in certain closed quarters. And to support you while you do it, because it's not easy for you either. God bless you for doing it, but we've got to.
Yes.
I'm astounded that a lot of the footage and things from those attacks have not at least informed our law enforcement and first responders here in a refined and respectful way.
Yes.
Because if we don't, then they're not prepared. There's no way that you can prepare for that other than to do that.
And that's one of the claims, like I said earlier, about you guys are just making this up and whatever.
Yeah.
Because we don't see the evidence.
Yeah.
I'll just respond to that real quick. The reason why you don't see the evidence is because we have empathy and honor and respect for the families of those individuals that were filmed in their last breaths.
Moments. Yeah.
And we don't want that family who's already traumatized and they know how they died. They don't have to see it over and over and over. So actually our government made a decision to censor and take all that down.
I get it. I totally get it.
And so, but it does affect us negatively, that so-called, as if we're like hiding stuff or whatever.
Yeah, and I totally get the decision point there for that. But maybe
there's a place where people can view it though. In Tel Aviv, I know there's a place.
Yeah.
And if we had a group of the leaders of these law enforcement communities and whatever that are the ones that will implement and bring that training back, I can help arrange for in-country. For one, I'll take you around, I'll show you, and you'll see the devastation, all that. But we can also have the viewing.
Need to do that. I think we need to do it.
We can have the viewing, and you get to see the edited version. But trust me, it is.
I don't doubt it, but I think in a responsible way,
and it will help you understand.
I think some local leaders would want to take you up on that. I really do, because I think we have to. There's got to be because once it's informed, then it becomes part of your reality.
When you see a mom talk about her son that's held captive, that was the day after my first deployment out of the 3 that we did. Literally the day after I went with my friend from Norway, who's the head of the Christian party in Norway, Eric. And so he rang me up. He says, "Hey brother, could you come and guide my group of politicians and media people and all this from Norway?" Yeah. And I was like, "Oh man!" I told my wife, and she's like, "Okay, one more day." And so it was one of those like sacrifices, personal sacrifices. Yeah. But I was so glad I did it, and so regretful that I did at the same time, because we ended that whole tour of the communities and the destruction, devastation, what have you, Nova, to finishing in Tel Aviv and sitting face to face with a mom. And I think the other one was a relative of someone else. It wasn't the parent. And to see these two family members, and especially mom, she just cut me. I mean, it was like, God. And like, no joke, I wrote my buddies. I said, guys, I'm ready to go back right now.
Yeah.
How do I go home and hug my kids, hug my wife, and she's living in that hell that she's in still now, 400 plus days later, with not knowing, is her son alive?
Or dead?
Is he taken care of? You know, is he being tortured?
Yeah.
Is he whatever, right? Just that mental and emotional torture.
Yeah.
And I think for an individual from here who's what's it called, protected from that kind of reality, just to sit and listen and to see that person, and to see what they're going through, you'll think twice if is it worth it to do all what we're saying that we can implement to create a response to the impending danger.
Otherwise,
why not?
Otherwise, it's on the other side of it. It's on the other side of it, and then
you don't want to be there.
And you don't want to be there.
I'm telling you, you don't want to be there.
Doron, I can't thank you enough, man. I hope you're holding up okay. Yeah, I can tell you're carrying a heavy load, my friend, and just know that we're here for you, and we love you, and appreciate you being part of what you're doing. It's really appreciated, man, because I know, as a storyteller, and you know, I've encountered my level of loss. I don't think it's anywhere near as profound as yours, but you know, every time you tell the story, there's a healing that happens, but there's also, you know, there's a revisiting of it,
reliving,
and it's a very generous, loving thing that you're doing, and I just appreciate you taking the time. How do folks get in touch with you or contact you if they want to connect around this?
Anyone who wants to connect with me, first of all, don't go to social media and Google my name. Because I've been shadow banned. So that's another important piece of information, that if you're going to speak the truth and try to share the truth, be prepared also to be shunned. So you can basically Google my name, DoronKeidar.com. I started my own website just so people can actually connect with me. And on there, I'll have all my social media links and the podcast and folks
can reach out to us too
on YouTube, and they can reach out to you,
and we'll connect.
And you can get connected.
Okay.
And I'll be more than happy to answer people's questions, what have you. Whatever's public on there is for me to be able to serve people and help them.
Thank you, man, and thank you for being here. Thanks to all of you for watching this. I know this is there's some tough stuff in here, but we wanted to bring you perspective. We wanted to bring you local perspective from someone who lived it, from someone who saw as close, I think, an example of what we're talking about in manifested reality as possible, and who also is very well trained and who has a point of view on what lessons learned are, right? So there were enough individuals and community and law enforcement questions that we felt like this was important. This isn't the end-all be-all, but it's certainly for the Gathering Storm project that we're doing, and this really helped a lot. So thank you, Doron, and we'll be in touch more. Will you come back at some point? We'd love to have you back. All right.
Absolutely.
All right. So thank you, everybody, for what you do, and we'll see you on the rooftop.